Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday, and today we are doing a tutorial on the free T3 to free T4 ratio. So what is the free T3 to free T4 ratio? It is, you take your free T3, divide it by your free T4, and that gives us a value, and then we can use that value to get an idea of how well we're converting T4 that's either made by your thyroid gland or from your that's in the bloodstream from your medication, how well the peripheral tissues are converting that T4 to T3. Remember, it's T3 that really has the impact inside the cells and tissues. So if you have TSH is normal and T4 is normal, or free T4 is normal, but you have a low T3 or free T3, you might still have a lot of hypothyroid signs and symptoms. So one of the things that's really important to this, this ratio is really beneficial when you're not taking any thyroid medication, and it's very beneficial when you're taking T4 only. If you're taking a T3 based medication and you take that T3 medication before the blood draw, what you're measuring is the T3 medication that you're taking. The half-life of T3 is about 12 to 24 hours, somewhere in that range. So the best thing to do if you really want to see how well your peripheral tissues are converting T4 to T3 is to not take your T3 based medication for 12 to 24 hours prior to the blood collection. If you are taking T3, the only way you can really use this free T3 to free T4 ratio with any level of validity is to be able to compare the same dose of T3 based medication to the same dose. So if today I'm taking 88 micrograms of T4 and 10 micrograms of T3, and the next blood draw I get done, I'm taking 88 micrograms of T4 and 5 micrograms of T3, I can't really compare those two values if I took the T3 before, because I've taken more T3 before the blood draw. So you have to have a consistent dose of T3 if you're going to use the ratios. Now, you're still not getting a great indicator of peripheral T4 to T3 conversion, but at least you're comparing apples to apples, okay? But if you're taking a T3 medication, probably the best thing to do is wait 24 hours before having your blood draw. So you take your T4 to T3, you take your Armour the day before, the next morning, don't take your medication before the blood collection, get the blood collected and then take your medication, okay? So if you look at the literature, the optimal ratio is somewhere between 0.31 and 0.34, but optimal does not always mean optimal. So just because there's a set range doesn't mean it's appropriate, okay? So that's important to understand. There is some interpretation to it, and we're not gonna get into all of that today, but I'll give you some tips. How do we calculate this? One of the things that you need to do is convert free T3 and free T4 to the same units. They are typically in different units. In the US, it's typically picograms per milliliter for T3, and free T4 is 1.2 nanograms per deciliter. Now there is a calculator, you can go to Optimal DX. They're a functional medicine website. They do a great job with a lot of calculators and things, and they do have a calculator where you can plug in these different numbers and they'll give you a value. The problem is that if you're not converting these to the same units, the ratio is going to probably be a different ratio. Okay, so this 0.31 to 0.34 is if you're converting both values into the same units and then dividing T3 by T4. So I'm going to give you an example. This person's free T3 was 1.9 picograms per milliliter. I used there's a website called unitslab.com. If you go to unitslab.com and you can search for the lab value you want, free T3, free T4, and it'll give you a calculator. You plug in whatever value you have and it can convert it to picomoles per liter. If you're outside the US, your values may already be in picomoles per liter, so you don't even have to do any work. But here in the US, 1.9 is converted. Use that Unitslab. That is 2.9186 picomoles per liter. You take the free T4, which was 1.2 nanograms per deciliter. Use the units converter and it gives you 15.4464 picomoles per liter. You divide the free T3 value by the free T4 value and we get 0.19. So 0.19 is well below the ratio of 0.34. So this is a person who's doing a really poor job converting T4 to T3, okay? So a couple guidelines for you. If it's less than 0.31, there's reduced conversion of T4 to T3. This doesn't necessarily mean you need T3. What this is telling you is that there's a reduced conversion, and that's usually not broken physiology, it's usually adaptive physiology because there's some type of a cell danger inflammatory process going on. Sometimes it's because of over-medication, and there are some people who have genetic predispositions which reduces the conversion of T4 to T3 from a genetic standpoint. It's usually up to maybe a 20% drop in T4 to T3 conversion. But the two big causes of this is typically some type of inflammatory process. The body is saying, hey, there's an inflammatory process. We're going to slow down the metabolism. That's part of the defense mechanism. I talk about this all the time. And over medication, if you flood the bloodstream with too much T4 and too much T3, it actually decreases the function of deiodinase 2. So inside the cells, there's reduced conversion of T4 to T3, even though you have plenty of T4 and potentially T3 in the bloodstream. So what goes on in the cell matters. We can talk about how much availability that there is. That's from what you take or what your gland makes and what's in the bloodstream. But really the most important thing is how do the cells and tissues utilize that T4 and T3 inside the cell. If they're not utilizing it optimally, then you're gonna have hypothyroid signs and symptoms, but we can't just assume that that's broken physiology. If your free T3 to free T4 ratio is between 0.31 and 0.34, you possibly have appropriate conversion, but we need to look at signs and symptoms and we need to look at the tissue conversion patterns. So if you're in that range, but you have glucose resistance, you have elevated lipids, you have any of the hypothyroid patterns I talk about on multiple other videos, and in my book, The Thyroid Debacle that I wrote with Dr. Kelly Halderman, it may be in the range, but it's inappropriate. Now we have to figure out why it's inappropriate, what's going on. The other thing we have to consider is that maybe you took the T3 before the blood draw, and so now what we're measuring is the T3 in the bloodstream and not what your tissues are converting. So check the tissue patterns and check to see when you took the T3 or your patient took the T3 before their blood draw. If the number is greater than 0.34, this is a person who might need more thyroid hormone. They may need iodine. Those are the two things we need to consider. Because what's happening is quickly as the T4 is getting to the cells and tissues, it's being converted into T3. This tells us that the cells are in a hypothyroid state and need more thyroid hormone. So what we need to consider is, was their T3 taken before the blood draw? If you took T3, let's say you're taking 20 micrograms of T3 and you take that before the blood draw, that higher free T3 is probably because of the medication, not because you're in a hypothyroid state. It's because of what you just took. Check those tissue patterns. Does this person have, despite a really high ratio, do they have tissue patterns of hypothyroidism impacting glucose resistance, liver function, renal function, a number of other things I talk about. And the other thing we can check is where's the total T4, total T3, reverse T3. If those are all low, all three of them are relatively low, then this is a person who's not making enough thyroid hormone, and then we have to figure out why. And this is a person who might need more thyroid hormone replacement. They may need iodine, and we need to get busy figuring out why is the gland shutting down its function. So very simple tutorial. Hope this helps. If you have any questions, put them below the video. This is not meant for you to be your own physician, but this is to help you understand your labs a little bit better, all right? Hope this helps. If you have any questions, put them below the video. And if you need more content, obviously go to I do have a YouTube channel. Juvagen, a lot of these videos are there.